With Halloween Kills finally being released this weekend, why not look back at every single timeline in the series and give you a ranking? Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Review. So as I said, Halloween Kills is finally being released in cinemas this weekend, and I kind of wanted to look back at every single timeline in the series and just give you guys my ranking. Of course, the Halloween series has pretty much turned into a pick your own adventure at this point. There's a lot of different storylines, a lot of different stories, some that have been wrapped up and others that have not. Let's kick things off at 5th place with the Anthology timeline. This of course has the fewest movies overall in the series. It is pretty much just Halloween 1 to Halloween 3, and overall I do really enjoy this timeline. I like that they actually had Halloween and Halloween 2 as its own story itself, and then they moved on to something different. Season of the Witch of course is Halloween 3, and it doesn't involve Michael Myers at all. Instead, the plan was to release a new horror movie around the holiday of Halloween every single year, and I do think Season of the Witch had a great storyline. It had these masks that pretty much come alive and kill the kids on Halloween. I think overall the story was there was some great ideas. Halloween 3, it's not the best movie, but it's definitely not the worst. I think if they had continued on with this idea and we had new anthology films every year on Halloween, it could have been a great idea. I just think with Halloween 3, they definitely had a great idea for sure, but they just missed the mark in certain areas. At the same time, Halloween 1 and Halloween 2 are a great little beginning and end to the Michael Myers story, and if we had left it there, it could have been quite interesting just to see where the series would have went over time. Next up, coming in 4th place, is a zombie timeline, otherwise known as the remake timeline. So this one of course comes from Rob Zombie, and they are two Halloween movies we got in the 2000s. So this looks back at Michael Myers and really kind of delves into the psyche of the character, why he became the Shape, or the boogeyman that we know today. I do like that direction they brought the movies in. They kind of humanized the character for sure by spending the first half of the remake actually with Michael during his childhood. So I do like that it is definitely different than the original Halloween, and I think if you're going to remake a movie, that's the best thing to do. Have an absolutely different perspective on that storyline, but just still keep the bones of what the original story was all about. So I do think they balance that quite well. The first half of the remake is back when Michael was a young boy, when he's in Smith's Grove, and we just delve into his psyche a little bit more. We do see his home life and how a lot of that actually affected him. Now the second half is more of a basic remake of the original movie, and it definitely does kind of go off the tracks from there. I don't enjoy the second half of the movie as much, but mainly it's just because I compare it to the original film. Still, the characters in this are enjoyable, if different, but overall for the remake, it's a fun movie. Where things definitely take a turn is in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. This one is a lot more brutal, it's a lot more sinister and a lot more in your face. And it does kind of delve into the issues I tend to have with Rob Zombie movies. One in particular is most of the characters in this come across as these kind of redneck type characters. When I look at Halloween, and particularly the first Halloween movie, what really made the movie stand out at the time was people could identify with the characters and the setting they were in. The 78 film was set in a suburban town that pretty much most audiences could identify with, whereas with Rob Zombie's Halloween, a lot of the characters, as I said, are these kind of redneck type characters, and it is hard to associate yourself with them because of it. As well as that, Halloween 2 is a lot more brutal, and it does still relate back to the sister storyline we get from the original timeline. Now don't get me wrong, I do still enjoy Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. What I like in particular is the story of Laurie Strode. I actually like how they delve into the traumatic events that happened in the remake and just kind of the effects that left on her. Rather than her being the hero of the movie, she actually spirals down this really dark path and becomes a very unlikable character because of the trauma she's ensued in the last movie. So I do enjoy again that they kind of flip the lid on things and they go down a path that you don't really see in these slasher films. You see the effects of what happened to the town of Haddonfield, what happened to Laurie, Annie and so on. Even Dr. Loomis, he's a much darker character in this one, in both movies, but in particular in H2, he's not a character you want to get behind, and he's definitely not a hero in the film. Instead, he's kind of this callous, selfish character that really does want to stop Michael, but at the same time he wants to make something out of it. So I like how they definitely flipped the lid on the entire thing. They went their own route with it, and at times it misses the mark, but at other times it does work. With H2, I much prefer the extended version of the movie. I think there's a lot more to delve into, there's a lot more character development, and when you watch that compared to the theatrical release, you can actually see the story they were trying to tell. Now at the same time, it does still have its faults. The body count in this is huge, but the kills are just a little bit too brutal for my liking. The characters, as I said, are just not very likable at all, and it does kind of disconnect you from their storylines. Coming in at third place is the Torn trilogy. Now this one is a big fan favorite timeline for a lot of fans of Halloween. For me, I enjoy these movies quite a lot. I still watch all three of these every single year, but I don't have the same love that maybe others have. Halloween 4 in particular, I didn't watch that. It was maybe the 5th or 6th Halloween movie I actually saw growing up. So the connection there and the nostalgia isn't as strong with me watching these movies, but I do enjoy Halloween 4 quite a bit. Yes, it has some excruciating bad points to it, Myers' mask in particular, but it also has some really great moments and some really good ideas. I think Donald Pleasence as Dr. Loomis is right on form in that movie. I love the development of his character turning into, again, this Van Helsing type character, but a little bit more crazy 10 years later. I also like the addition of Jamie Lloyd, and I like Rachel in the movie. I think there's some great scenes, one in particular when they're on the rooftop with Michael. So a lot works in this movie, and I love what they set up as well, even with the ending with Jamie coming out after killing her stepmother. I think if they had gone down the path they wanted to, with Jamie becoming maybe potentially the new Michael, it could have been quite interesting to see where that went. But instead we got Halloween 5, where they introduced the Man in Black, they introduced the Torn storyline, and what bugs me about Halloween 5 quite a bit is you can clearly tell they did not know what they were doing. A lot of times I see Halloween 4 to Halloween 6 as cash grabs, where they wanted to kind of get as many Halloween films out as quick as they could while the franchise was hot, and of course they did pay the price for that with Halloween 5. Although Halloween 4 is beloved and it was a huge hit at the box office, Halloween 5 had the opposite effect. Now that brings us to Halloween 6, which I adore. I watch this movie continuously every year. It was one of the first Halloween movies I saw, and although it has a terrible storyline and an even worse producer's cut, I do still really enjoy the movie. I think Michael Myers in this one is one of the darkest shaped characters we've gotten up until that point, and honestly forever in the Halloween series. I think Michael in this one is just vicious in his onslaught, but there is just something quite dark and terrifying about him as well. I love the character in this one. I love the portrayal of Myers in particular, and you can tell it, yes, has a little bit of a connection to Halloween 4, but the portrayal is so much more darker. There are still issues I have with it. The opening kill, although is again terrifying and a great kill, I didn't love what it did with the character with Jamie, and I didn't love the ending either. So with Halloween Curse of Michael Myers, it is definitely one of my favorites, but as for the Torn trilogy, it's not my favorite timeline overall. Next up, taking second place, is the new Strode timeline. So this is of course the current timeline involving Halloween 1978, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. This one is pretty much only at the midway mark because we haven't even gotten Halloween Kills in cinemas yet. But I think next year I will probably do more of a definitive ranking of all timelines. As for now though, it is sitting in second place. I do enjoy this one. I enjoy the return of Laurie Strode in particular. I love her character arc in this one, and the effects that the night in 1978 also had on the town of Haddonfield. I think a lot of people see this one as maybe being a bit too out there with how Laurie developed, but for me it can still be seen as quite realistic. I think a lot of people forget Laurie pretty much put Michael down multiple times in the first movie, and she did see him get back up. For anyone going through an ordeal like that would be a traumatic event, but actually seeing somebody not die continuously in the same night could lead to what happens to Laurie Strode in 2018. Another reason though I like this timeline, it is the closest we've gotten to Michael Myers with regards to the original shape. I think Nick Castle gives a great performance, but James Hugh Courtney definitely has taken over the role, maybe as the definitive Michael. He gives a great performance, and it does harken back to what Castle did in '78. We also of course have a lot of returning characters. When you look at this timeline, we have Nurse Marion, we have Sheriff Brackett, Lindsay Wallace, Tommy Doyle, all coming back to the franchise 40 years later. So there is an almost full circle moment when you look at this timeline in particular. I do have my issues with it. I think Dr. Sartain is definitely a problem, and it gave me a sense of Halloween 6, and there is maybe just a little bit too much Easter eggs. But time will tell how this timeline wraps up, and will it be the definitive one next year. And finally, coming in at first place is a sister timeline involving Halloween 1978, Halloween 2, H2O and Halloween Resurrection. Now right out of the gate, I am going to say I pretty much pretend Halloween Resurrection doesn't exist, and that gives you a perfect trilogy. With Halloween, Halloween 2 and H2O, we follow the character of Laurie Strode and her brother Michael Myers. It is a very simple storyline of Michael trying to kill his sister, and I like it. I think with these movies it gives you a beginning, a middle and an end. As well as that though, I do enjoy the character arc of Laurie Strode. I think it is the most realistic timeline you'd get for Laurie Strode. You'd see her growing up to be a headmistress, of actually leaving Haddonfield and staying away from all of that mayhem. So it does come across as the most plausible storyline, but I also like the character arc that Laurie goes on. She of course goes on a very similar path to the 2018 Laurie, where she becomes an alcoholic and she does get an addiction to pain medication. But what I like about Laurie's story with this timeline is you do actually see her character arc develop on screen. So you see her in the original Halloween as this kind of quiet, shy character, and by the time we jump 20 years later, there is that moment towards the end of H2O where she turns around and hunts Michael instead, that she has had enough and she becomes the hunter and he becomes the prey. I think it's a great full circle moment to the franchise, and it was honestly just a great way to end the franchise completely. I think if they had kept it that way, it would have been a great capper to the series, but of course we had Halloween Resurrection. Halloween Resurrection pretty much ruined everything that Halloween H2O did, so for me, honestly, I tend to pretend it just doesn't exist. Instead, Halloween 1, Halloween 2 and H2O is a perfect trilogy for the series. Even if this current timeline doesn't work out, we have a great story arc overall when it comes to the Halloween franchise. I also think Halloween 1 and Halloween 2 being set on the same night with very similar directing, the cinematography and the characters all coming back just helps that whole timeline as well. Dr. Loomis also gets pretty much a full complete story where he sacrifices himself at the end of Halloween 2. But guys, that is just my own personal ranking of the Halloween timeline. Remember guys, as always, if your ranking is different, that is okay. You can leave it in the comments down below and we will talk about it. Remember as well guys, there's a hell of a lot of horror content coming out this week. We have Halloween Kills, we have the Chucky TV series, we have Scream 5's trailer, there's I Know What You Did Last Summer TV series, and even Slumber Party Massacre remake. So there's a hell of a lot of content coming up. But if you are interested in content like this, if you want to see more videos like this one, you can of course click any of those links down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.